Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright, and sunny day. It is Thursday, the 19th of September, and I'm in the reading nook with a nice hot cup of tea. And box to continue unboxing. I know for a fact that I've got a couple of interesting and special things in here, one of which is far more controversial than the other, and one which is literally just been released, and everyone has been waiting to see the final product. Quite possibly, it is the most controversial release of the year, and it is this the Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons 2024, or 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons revised, if you will. Not quite sure of exactly what the title is of this new edition, but this is the alternate cover, and it's very attractive, I must say. I like the standard cover, but this is very nice. And the other thing about it is that with the release this week, is it does come with a rather fetching 20-sided die. Find the right face. There we go. So you've got the one, of course, the opposite face. You have perhaps the most famous ampersand in the world. But that's a really lovely little addition. You've got free if you ordered it for the shops, which is where this book came from. So we have quite an interesting piece of artwork in there. You can't quite see the full details. I'm sure it's going to be shown elsewhere. Basically, a dragon in some sort of temple or arena or something like that. Their character is ready to face off against him. And we get into them itself. And it, for the most part, it sort of does look like a book for Dungeons and Dragons. The trade dress is pretty much the same. Now, this was released, the standard edition, essentially the anniversary editions were released at Gen Con. There are about 3,000 copies available. I wasn't able to get one. So I've had a bit of a wait, like everyone else, to see this. So here we've got the, welcome to adventure, to the introduction, telling you what you need, how to use the book, essentially the core things that you need, Dungeon Master Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual. And it says learn by watching. It says, of course, because really times have changed since the last time we had a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And that comes back to another point I wanted to make about this, is that it's 10 years since the release of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, 2014. We've not had a new edition. So it makes sense that the role-playing game, the world's most popular role-playing game, has a new edition. And that it's released in the same year as the game's 50th anniversary. That could not make more sense than than anything else. It's the perfect time. So, got a guide on how to use the book, on the possibility of the world's adventure, and then we turn over a fantastic piece of artwork of warriors against and adventures against a dragon, and then we get into how to play the game, whether you want to be a player or a dungeon master, and steps on guide both. You have the rhythm of play, because there is a rhythm of play, interaction, combat, action, back and forth at the table, and it's an ongoing game, whether it's adventures, campaigns, explaining about the dice, and then we'll get into the actual mechanics of the game. Starting off, okay, here are the 6 abilities, here are the ability scores and so on, and the D20 test. Essentially, this in a couple of pages, in one essentially one 2-page spread, we have an explanation of the core rules. Now, these, of course, will be familiar to anybody who has played Dungeons and Dragons since 2001. You are rolling a D20. You have difficulty class. You need to equal or exceed that. It's a bit more over here, but essentially, it expands it, with combat, saving throws, advantages and disadvantages, and so on. I remember advantages and disadvantages when that came out. When I saw that, I went, "That's I said at the time that turns Dungeons and Dragons into an actual role playing game because it actually gives a mechanic to encourage you to role play." And I still hold to that. It's a great mechanic. So general skills and actions, and actually, what I really quite like is just looking through this. So the first example of play um, is actual social interaction. Now, as much emphasis as there is on Dungeons and Dragons as an adventure game, combat and action and so on, but having social interaction up front, saying, "Here's an example of play," that's really good. So it's really, I mean, of course, really what it's looking at is the core pillars of the game. So obviously, interaction, then we have exploration, so on, and then we've got an example of exploration. And it does kind of step out there. So you've got a shot of players at the table, with their imaginary behind them. That's a kind of a classic role-playing image, but it's nice to have it there. It's acknowledging that there are players involved. So yes, then it moves on to combat, following the exploration example. There we are up against the Displacer Beast. I really like this artwork. It's quite nice and dynamic. So go through that, go through all the details of combat, and then we have a combat and damage example. So those are great additions, and so in just 30 or so pages, you explain the core rules of the game, everything that the player needs to know in order to get up, roll up the table, and enjoy himself before he makes choices. Determined by what he plays. And then next, we have this really fantastic. This is one of my favourite pieces of artwork in the book. It's this acknowledgement of the history of Dungeons and Dragons, of course, of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, portraying the characters from that cartoon in classic adventures, giving them fully painted artwork and not cartoon artwork. So then we move on to, creating your characters. So this is essentially choosing a class, and here's a breakdown of the character sheet. And this goes into a bit more detail, explaining about their various abilities and what they do. Rolling for the ability scores, that. And adding little details, describe appearance and personality based upon the stats. If they're high, choose those. What do you look like? Fill in details, and then you've got lists there for level advancement, essentially how many XP you're going to need for each level. Handling level advancement, of course. Expect. And then up front, you can multi-class. Possible trinkets you can find. And then we look at the individual character classes. So, they're all here. There are no new character classes here. So you have Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. And then we get into each of them. So each is given several pages. And then we get into Barbarian subclasses like Path of Berserker, Path of the Wild Heart, Path of path of the world tree and path of the zealot. So you've got multiple options within each class. Bard, and a list of all the bard spells. So bard subclasses include College of Dance, College of Glamour. Some really kind of fetching artwork. So dancer, that, and then glamour, almost like a medieval glam rock there. Followed by College of Law and College of Valor. So slightly different versions of the bard. Cleric. List of all the cleric spells. And the subclasses include life domain, light domain, trickery domain, and so on. So these are different basic domains that essentially they're going to get extra spells from, worship different gods and the like. Druid, and the druid, of course, is perhaps one class I think that will attract attention for people coming to the book anew if they've seen the film, because the druid character in there is actually quite a lot of fun, and obviously can change into an owlbear, which not normally able to do, but there we go. I've got a list of all the druid spells, and then the subclasses include circle of land and the moon and sea, and stars. And move on to fighter. Subclasses include battle master, champion, and eldritch knight. The eldritch knight gets spells, of course, and then a psi warrior, for those of you who want to bring in psionics back into play. Not in a great detail, because essentially essentially getting protective field, sonic strike, telekinetic movement, and so on. It's entirely up to what does that fit your world. It's probably not going to fit every single world. There we go. Then we have the monk. The subclasses include the warrior of mercy, warrior of shadows, warrior of the elements, warrior of the open hand, paladin, and subclasses are oath for devotion. And of course, you're listing all the spells there for the paladin. Oath of Glory and Oath of the Ancients. And Oath of Vengeance. So in each of these, multiple options for the character, giving the players more choice. Same again for the Ranger. We have Beastmaster, Fey Wanderer, Gloomstalker, and Hunter, Rogue, that includes his Arcane Trickster, Assassin, Soul Knife, and Simple Straightforward Thief. Sorcerer, there for sorcerer spells. The subclasses start with Aberrant Sorcery. Comes with Psionic Spells. Clockwork Sorcery. Draconic Sorcery and Wild Magic Sorcery. And the Warlock. List of spells there for the Warlock. Different patrons for the Warlock, starting with the Archfey patron, Celestial patron, Fiend patron, Great Old One patron, and then lastly we've got the Wizard. It's a full list of the spells for the Wizard. Two pages of spells for the Wizard. The Wizard gets access to a huge range of spells, allow the character to really specialize. And the Wizard subclasses include the Abjurer, Diviner, Evoker, Illusionist. And then, so that's all the classes. You know, I mean, obviously each one of those is going to be slightly tweaked and changed from the previous edition. And then, having made that choice, the next choice is character origins. Now, this is one of the biggest controversial changes, I think, in the book. Really, because previous editions have called it race, and the change of wording really means to get away from the negative connotations of race, and that's fine. So essentially, what you really have is character origins is a combination of species, which is the real change from race, add things like background descriptions and so on. So before we get into the species, we have quite a nice breakdowns of these different backgrounds, nicely illustrated there. I'm getting sort of like, you know, entertained by the dogs next door. There we go. These are the different options in terms of backgrounds. Really, it's a case of just sort of like, you know, the player making the choices of what he wants to do, how he wants to create characters, and then we get into the species descriptions. We have the Aasimar with the heavenly wings, the Dragonborn, and each of these have their own traits. You can, you know, basically choose from and so on. Dwarf, the elf, gnome, and Goliath, and the halfling. Humans, and then there is the shot of the half orcs, which caused no little consternation when it was released. Tiefling, and that's it. More great artwork, and then we're into the feats. Essentially, special features not tied to character classes that can be taken over the course of a character's progression. So, you know, got a full list of those. I'm not going to show you all of those because that would be not very exciting. But just show you some of the artwork because it's really nice artwork, as to be said. So this is a list of spells, and again, I'm not going to show you all of the spells because that's not very exciting. You're just looking at a list of spells. And what can I say? Reading a list of spells is not very interesting. Um, Writing a list of spells is not very interesting. Editing a list of spells is not very interesting. I have done it. I've certainly done the editing of a list of spells. Um, but it's when you're doing it, it's often sometimes part of the task. So you give it as much attention as it deserves, or just like the rest of the book. So yeah, the full list of spells. I mean, the spells themselves. Just see how much this takes up of the book. It is going to be quite a large section in comparison. So the spells run from page 234, 235, 23347. So just over 100 pages of this book. So just show you that bit there. That's all the spells. You do also have a section on um, goods as well, goods and gear. Yep. So here's the equipment section. So that's where you'll find all the equipment and weapons and weapons table. Further back, because the gear table was kind of lost in the book. We've got some sample creature stat blocks, and perhaps the biggest, most important addition to the creature stat blocks is the cat and it having dark vision. So there are a lot of very mundane creatures here first, kind of like a taster, but then very quickly we do have things like imps and pseudo dragons and quasits. There's the pseudo dragon. There's the quasit. And we have a reef shark and a slad tadpole. One of the most dangerous monsters in Dungeons and Dragons, but a very tiny version of it. Bringing the book to a close. There. 359. There is a page there. Just can't. There we go. So it ends with a rules glossary. Useful. And of course the index. So yeah, that then is the last bit of artwork in the book. So that's Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook for 2024, the new and revised edition. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you did, then please do click on the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And of course, if you want to be able to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a box containing a book or game, or in this case, the new Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons, new in 2024, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.